Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 185. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com. And we're excited to have with us the acclaimed and celebrated comic book writer and owner of Diebold Comics, John Holland. John.
Thank you for having me.
How you doing?
I am fine, sir. Hey, before we even get started, I want to tell you, since I first contacted you, I've been listening to your podcast like religiously. I mean,
so you're the one. The one.
You've actually, some of your guests have really given me some really good ideas.
Okay.
I listened to what was it? Bound.
Mm-hmm.
Creators that did Bound, and they were talking about how I think they offered their comic free on Global Comics, and that they've been, to read, and they've been doing really good Kickstarters. And I've actually got my comics up on Global Comics, but I was charging for all of them. And, like I was telling you, Alma, I'm kind of getting ready to launch a Kickstarter. So I decided to offer that for free and, see how it goes. And I've already had 500 views of it, reads of it, and just, in just last couple of weeks. So
nice.
I figure it's nothing. It's getting people out there. And a lot of people still want to buy that physical and have that physical copy. But, they were saying they were I think one of the most read comics on Global Comics last year or something. And then they still have had really good funded Kickstarters. So I was like, well, if they can do it, that's a good, so I've been listening to a lot of different, some of your, because you've got a lot of guests that are doing Kickstarters, and just some of the tiers and stuff like that. I've been getting a lot of ideas. So I've been listening to you. Really, I was just listening to your newest one that you just posted today. Was it today you posted or yesterday?
Okay.
I don't remember which, but I was listening to that. I usually listen to most of my Kickstarters in the car driving around.
Okay.
That way I'm more focused. If I'm at home, if I try to listen to them, I'm always trying to do something else, and I don't pay as much attention.
Oh, wow. Okay. Excellent. Wow. I'm glad it's been helping out. That's cool. Yeah. Awesome. I mean, because you're right now, John, you're in Louisiana.
Yes.
And I'm sure you're probably hiding out from the humidity. I'm sure you're in a place with air conditioning right now.
Oh, yes. Yeah. You can't live with air conditioning out here. I don't know how they did it before they had AC.
And you're not new to comic book writing. So before we went live, I was talking to you about the fact that I recognized your name. I recognized your name. I'm like, is this the same John Holland? And then I jumped in and I looked up, and it says, yes, you're the one that's been you've been writing comics. You've been putting stories out, through Kitchen Sink Press and Fantagraphics. You've been around. You've been in the industry since the early '90s, correct?
Yeah, actually, probably the '80s. Late '80s. Okay. Probably before that. Trying to break in. So. One of the first people I worked with was Sam Keith. I don't know if you recognize Sam Keith, the Max and Image. Yep. And he and I started breaking in together. We were working on some stuff together, but then he kind of started getting to work a lot quicker than I did. And ended up, getting into Marvel and then Image. And, for about 5 minutes, I was supposed to be the writer on the Max. But then he went to Globes, which... I don't blame him. Bill was a lot better writer, so But yeah, so I've been around for Kitchen Sink, Fantagraphics. I don't even remember some of the other companies. Malibu. Well, it wasn't Malibu. It was one of their offshoots. Adventure Comics. I did an adaptation of Harry Harrison's Death World,
right,
in comics form. Different things, and then I wasn't really self-publishing at that time. It was all pretty much through the small publishers. And after we started self-publishing, actually, I self-published a book called Diebold before we had Diebold Comics, and with an artist, Brian Clifton. And
Brian Clifton, yeah.
Yeah, and we did 2 issues of that. And then we kind of took a break, and I actually kind of took a break from comics for a little while. And then when I came back in, I started mainly self-publishing and started with some new stuff. And then I started to, republish. That was the original book. That was the first thing I think we self-published. We self-published that under Silent Partners was the name. And
Mm.
Brian had a really good idea to help pay for the cost of the book. Was he pre-sold every page in the comic, all the original artwork, and
Oh, cool.
at the bottom of each page was the person that bought the artwork. Their name appeared at the bottom of each page, so that's where we got
Oh,
the name from, Silent Partners. So they were kind of like our silent partners in the comic.
oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that really was it's paid for the book and everything. So we did 2 issues, and then we kind of, you know, both of us had things going on, and kind of fell apart, and just couldn't get to the next issue. And about that time, I think both of us kind of took a break from writing for a while. And I came back in like probably the 2000s or a little later, and started self publishing.
Hmm. So let me ask you, as someone that's been in the industry for, knocking on, 30 years or so, what are some of the changes that you've seen happen in the independent comics, in the independent comics world?
Self-publishing, I think, has gotten a lot bigger. I mean, it was
Hmm.
always there, but back when I first was in it too, it was self-publishing was more of a lot of people kind of looked down on it too. It
Hmm.
was like if you were self-publishing, that just meant you couldn't get into a publisher or whatever, unless you were self-publishing. You became like Dave Sim with Cerebus, and the Turtle Guys, a few people like that. But
Right.
now self-publishing, web comics, the internet wasn't around back then. So now, you see all the web comics and comics on the internet, and a lot more self-publishing, I think, than we did back, at that time.
Hmm. Oh, because yeah, as you mentioned, like other than the big two, there were, as you said, there were some, and you worked with some of those, like Kitchen Sink Press and Fantagraphics, Malibu, and Innovation was one of the other ones, I believe,
Yeah,
too.
yeah, innovation. I did an issue of Quantum Leap for.
Do you feel as though today it's easier or harder to publish comics and make a name for yourself in that sense?
It's easier in the sense that I think self-publishing,
Hmm.
and it doesn't really cost a lot, to print up a comic and get it out there. It's a little harder, I think, in some ways, to get your name out there, because there's a lot more people self-publishing, a lot more going
Right.
on. But it's just a matter, I think, of doing things like this podcast, and just getting your
Right.
name out there. I've just started really getting on Twitter.
So what would be your advice? I'm just thinking about it from the perspective is like when you got back into it, when you got back into writing again, what were some of the things, skills or disciplines that you were happy you already learned previously that you didn't have to learn as compared to a new comic book writer right now?
Yeah, I guess just the discipline for sitting down and being able to write a comic and
Mm,
get it done. Because I know before, and even still sometimes nowadays, it's easy to get distracted. I'll start a script, and you know it may take me a month to finish it, because I'll do a few pages and then I'll do something else. And I've been trying to, the last few scripts I've been writing, I focus and make myself finish the whole script in like one sitting, or whenever, as quickly as I can. So
mm,
I don't spend that time. I've got some artists that I was like doling out a page or two at a time. They'd be like, all right, here's a page or two of script, draw that. When they finish, I'd write another page or two. So now I'm trying to get the whole script to the artist, and let them see what everything's happening on it.
right.
It still doesn't happen all the time. I just sent a script to Roman, one of my artists, on robot sex for the second issue of it, and I was doing like a couple of pages, and then the book kind of stretched out longer than I expected. So I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to take these pages and move them here and move them here. And then when I finally sent him the script, he's like, all right, what page are we on? He says, I'm so confused. So I had to sit down and kind of look at, okay, this page follows this page, because we just kind of I moved things around, because the story was just taking more of a life on its own and kind of growing on me.
Well, and I do have to say I read Robot Sex and I loved the story. I love.
Thank you.
Is there going to be more issues to this?
There's at least 3 issues. Originally, it was
Okay.
going to be a one shot, and then when I started getting towards page 20 or so, I realized I'm not going to be able to tie it all up. And then I thought, well, I could go a little further, because one good thing about being a self-publisher is I can write as many pages as I want for a script. Like I did a book called The Getaway Driver that was going to be 24 pages, and it ended up being 36 pages. But
Right.
when I got to about page 20 of Robot Sex, I realized it's I have enough story to go at least one more issue. So I figured I was just going to end it at page 20. And that's why it kind of ends abruptly on page 24. You know, it's
Right.
really not, you know, and because I figured, well, I'm just going to do another issue of it. And the plan originally was going to be do 2 issues. Then I started writing the second issue, and a friend of mine, an artist, passed away. He had a heart attack suddenly about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Mm.
And he was actually about to do a cover for me for another comic. And so it got me thinking, and there's some ideas that he likes, and there's some ideas that we had talked about. And I thought, you know what, this would be perfect to kind of put into this next script with Robot Sex. So it actually, my plan was going to be second issue, now is in the third issue, and the second issue has expanded out to kind of take into kind of like a tribute to my friend.
Okay. Now, I have to ask you too. Well, first of all, I like the robot's name. The robot's name is pretty cool.
Yeah, I tried to find something that was like basically kind of mundane. Oh, well, yeah, I'm sorry. Your name is Barney. But you know, something that wasn't like real, like a robot name, you know, like
Right.
X-34 or something. I wanted something like a normal name.
No, and I love, so I'm curious about this. Is Robot Sex take place in the same universe as Aya? Because it
Ayla.
does? Ayla. Okay.
Yeah, I kind of, as I've been writing some of this stuff, I've been dropping little hints like that everything is kind of connected, you know, because
Okay.
you know the main character's name is Laveau, and she has a sister actually that we're going to meet in issue 2, Marie, which kind of,
Okay.
you know, and plus she's a speaker of the dead, which kind of ties
Right.
back to Ayla. So
Right.
yeah, so it's kind of like I don't know how hard and fast I'm creating this timeline, but some of the books I've kind of like dropped little hints that they're all kind of connected.
Right. And one of the things I really liked also about Robot Sex is the robot, whose name is Barney,
Mhm.
um, talks in pictograms.
Yeah,
Is that the correct?
yeah. Yeah, I've had that idea for that for so long, but I just didn't know if I could create enough pictures like that for somebody to develop, you know, to speak to somebody. But I figured I was going to give it a try.
So where did that idea come from?
Some of it came from the artist on it, Roman. He did the 6th issue of Lizards for me, and on
Okay.
his Twitter feed, he's always drawing robots and all these really strange drawings of robots and people and everything. And I just wanted to do something that was like really different, because you know, Robot Sex, I just throw in some of the strangest stuff. You know, I'm like, you know what,
Oh man.
this is just going to
Yeah.
be really weird, but it's going to work. And some of it was just old ideas, like the walking eyeball and things like that were ideas that I had from other stories that I thought this would fit in here. And
Right.
it just all kind of, and then the title came to me, and I had the title for a while, and I was like, if nothing, that title is going to attract attention. And it
Mm.
does. When I do a convention and I'm at the table, that's one of the people look at that book, you know, and I have to explain to them, look, it's not X-rated. It's you know, pretty fairly, I think, family, you know, I mean, I think pretty much anybody could read it.
Right.
I said the title is kind of, you know, just to get your attention more than anything.
I love, yes, and the design of, I get for our audio listeners, there's also these creatures that have these long legs that are reminiscent of like the wheelers from the Return to Oz, but they have the bodies of, it reminds me of like the Fry Guys from the McDonald's commercials. That's a throwback from the 80s in a bit. But
Yeah. Yeah,
I,
those
I
actually came from an idea from a book that when I was telling you about my friend that passed, Terry,
mm,
those I always call them daddy long legs because they were kind of like the spiders, with the
right.
long legs, and that's what I always kind of called them. And that was something that something we threw around, and it just never went anywhere. So I was like, I'm going to use them in this. So robot sex has kind of become a lot of different ideas I've just thrown together in there.
Right. It makes me really so what I love about what I love about this book is that it makes me want to learn more about the world itself. So as a writer, so let me ask you this question. As a writer, did you come up with the concept of the characters first, a story, or a world first that you created?
In robot sex, it was the characters first, and
Okay.
robot sex has been it's been one of those books that I've been writing like a page at a time, and it's just
Okay.
it's one I kind of knew where I wanted to go, and I kind of I've got the ending in sight, but between the beginning and the ending, I didn't have a lot plotted out, and
Right.
it's just been, you know, I had the characters like where she meets with they're leading the robots through the desert. I had those characters, and it's like each little arc in there moves me to the next spot. I think about, okay, now I'll do this. So it hasn't been a really heavily plotted, like out page by page. It's been I'm taking the characters, I'm going from here, and I know where I'm going with them, and I know kind of some of the stops along the way. But as I write, it gives me ideas. Sometimes it'll make me think about, oh, let me add this to it, and so
Right.
it's some of it's been a little surprising to me, as I go through. So it's been interesting.
So so the artist that you had do this, as you said, for Robot Sex was someone that you worked with previously as well.
Yeah, he did. I think the first thing he did for me was a couple short stories in Lizards, because like you said, Lizards I originally published through Fantagraphics, and then when I republished him, I wanted to continue it, so I was doing a few short stories, and then
Okay.
issue 6 is actually a full length story, and he did the art for it.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so then I got the idea. The plan was to do issue 7 of Lizards, but then I got the idea for Robot Sex, and I was like, all right, let's do this next. And like I said, originally Robot Sex was going to be a one issue, and I was going to go back to Lizards, but now Robot Sex has grown to 3 issues at the least. And I could see it continuing more because it's a fun book to write. Because like I said, I've it's one of the books that I've kind of like I'll try anything in it. Like issue 2, I actually have dinosaurs in it and flying monkeys.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it gets a little weird or weirder.
Yeah. I love yeah the dialogue that you put in here, and the lettering itself too is just so visual. I'm really impressed with it. It's a and for those that are listening and watching, check out Robot Sex. As as John said, it's not graphic or any of that. It's almost if I had to call it's almost like it feels like a post-apocalyptic fantasy in a way.
Yeah, I think that's a good description of it.
Yeah, because there is post-apocalypse, but it's not the type that you think, because there's so many bizarre characters, and there is a sense of fantasy that's involved in it as well.
One
So
of the ideas when I first sat down to start writing it, I thought about Saga, Brian Vaughan Saga. And
yeah,
I thought, this is going to be my Saga. And it's nothing like Saga, and it's not coming anywhere near it. But, I kind of thought this is going to be my Saga where I'm going to start it and going to be this big, long storyline. And it's not, but it's just kind of, but in Saga, there's a lot of times, a lot of weird characters, a lot of different things
right.
happening.
And so this plus, as you said, that the getaway driver Alma, and then you have a girl and her dog. So all of these have the copyright stamp on it of 2021. Did you write all of these just recently, or these are just ones that you've just been able to just publish as of recently?
These are all stories that I wrote in the last year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, Getaway Driver was that's actually the same artist Roman from Robot Sex did the Getaway Driver.
Okay, all right.
And, A Girl and Her Dog is Hernan, who is doing the art for Alma.
Right.
And Girl and Her Dog was one of those. That was one of the fastest stories that I've come up with the idea and wrote in just like 4 or 5 hours. Wow. I kind of was playing around with the idea, and I had the title "A Girl and Her Dog," which, I know is a riff off of Harlan Ellison's short story "A Boy and His Dog." Mm-hmm. But the stories are nothing alike. And I had a friend that her dog had just recently passed away, and then I was thinking, my last dog, it's been a couple years, but I've always had a dog all my life, and you always get to that point where you have to usually have to put them down because they're just so old and sick. And I just wanted a story that kind of talked about that relationship between a person and their dog.
You wrote it in just one sitting, basically, as you said.
Yeah, basically, I bought like a little podium, like that people used to speak in front of, and I've been writing on it. And I find standing up, I write so much better because I pace a lot. I'll write a page and I'll walk around. I'll go back and write a page or two, and I'll walk around. When I sit down, I don't have that freedom to move around as much, and I'm finding that I'm writing a lot better as I stand than I did when I sat down. I actually sent A Girl and Her Dog to Tony Isabella, who created the Black Lightning for DC Comics and did a lot of work for Marvel back in the 70s and 80s. And I couldn't have paid him to do a better review of it. He basically called it one of the best comics of the year. And he just raved about it, which I was not expecting. So I was like thrilled that he liked the book as much as he did.
Yeah. And so, my question to you as well is, we have some writers that might be listening to this and say, John, where'd you find? I have a story to tell, but I don't know where to get an artist. What would be your recommendation to them?
I hate to say this, but Facebook.
Oh yeah.
All the artists I found recently have all been through Facebook. Back in the 80s when I started, it was all, I don't know if you remember, there used to be there was a newspaper called Comic Buyer's Guide.
Yeah.
That they ran a classified section in the back, and I used to keep a classified ad in there looking for artists almost every issue. And I found that's where I found all my artists at the time, through that. Now there is no, really paper publications or anything. So, and Facebook has like a group for everything. They've got, and they've got quite a few different groups of writers looking for artists looking for writers, connecting creators. And I just go on a group and basically post, hey, I'm looking for somebody. And then, you get about 1 billion responses, and you just kind of, work your way through them, and until I can find, I find people that, that fit my budget, that will fit their budget, because, some people want more than what I can afford to pay, and that's fine. They're worth it, and I'm not going to ask them to take but there's usually somebody within that, your range that you can find. And, I've been lucky to find ones like Roman, who is a great artist, Hernan, who did a Girl and Her Dog. Now the artist on 2 Tons of Fury is actually local, and he's a friend of mine. So he's been like the driving force behind that comic, because he's a big Herbie fan. I mean, he's, for Larry, I think comics ended like in 1970. He likes all the old comics, and he's been after me to do a Herbie story forever, and I could just not do a Herbie story. Every time I sat down to try to write Herbie, I just could not write him. And Larry was doing like, they weren't like cover recreations, but he was like creating new covers for old books, like for like Justice Society and some of the older DC comics. He would create like a new cover for a story that really didn't exist, and he was selling them on eBay. And he actually created the cover that's the cover for 2 Tons and sold it on eBay. And when I seen that cover, it just, something clicked in my mind, and I was like, I know what story to write now, you know. And I was some reason I was a fan of Fat Man. You know, Fat Man lasted 3 issues in the mid '60s. It was published by a company called Lightning Comics. And they were 364 page issues, and I bought them when they came out. You know, I don't have them now, but I've always remembered that character because he was just so goofy, you know, and just, you know, he was just, you know, it sounds so ridiculous when you talk about, you know, he turns into a flying saucer and he flies and things like this. But when I seen that cover, it was another book that I was able to write. I just started writing and it all just flowed out without a problem.
And as you say, he's there. There's some allusion to the Captain Marvel character as well because of people say Shazam these days, but he'll always be Captain Marvel to me.
Actually, no, not that Captain Marvel. It's the Captain Marvel that yells "split." He's an android and his body comes apart.
So okay.
There was another Captain Marvel that nobody remembers. And he was
he has the little, you know, Fat Man. He has the little cape too that reminds me of the Golden Age Captain Marvel.
Now, yeah, Fat Man was created by Otto Binder and C.C. Beck, who were the actually creators of Captain Marvel, the original Captain Marvel. Cool. So that costume, yes, I think if you colored it and put the lightning bolt on it, that's Captain Marvel's costume.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But we did the other Captain Marvel that was an android, who actually, that Captain Marvel was created by Carl Burgess, who created the original Human Torch for Marvel. Oh, okay. And I don't know how many issues he lasted. He had his own comic, and I don't remember the publisher of it, but it didn't last too long. And he was just another one of those weird characters that were coming out in the mid '60s. You know, they were kind of like all these stories were trying to follow that campy Marvel style that, you know, Marvel was doing in the mid '60s, and not very many of them succeeded at it.
So you wrote the script for 2 Tons of Fury, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And how long did this one take you?
That one actually was another one that I think I did in one day.
Wow.
I took a day off. I brought my little podium out on my porch, and I stood out. I turned on my radio out there and listened to music and wrote, you know, I was like, I'm not leaving until I finish this story, you know, because I was afraid if I stopped, I would just kind of not get back to it soon enough. And I turned it out in a day. Now, you know, that makes it sound like, oh, I'm writing really quick. But then when you turn around, like the first issue of Ayla, I think it took me like 6 months to write. You know, that was one of those books I wrote a page. I'd send to Have, he'd draw it, and I'd send him another page, you know, and then he'd get busy stuff and I wouldn't send him anything. And it just took forever to do. Those 4 issues took us forever to get done.
Wow. Yeah. But then you also recently, you did the Alma, which you have a really cool log line for that one. Do you want to tell people what Alma's about?
What if Buffy was a 72-year-old grandmother? And that is like when I'm at a convention and I'm doing a table, and you know, a lot of the younger people I've noticed haven't really watched Buffy, but Buffy's become so iconic that even when I say, "Hey, have you watched Buffy?" and they're like, "Nah," I say, "Well, you know who Buffy is, right?" And they're all, "Yeah, of course we know who Buffy is." And once I give that tagline, it's like more people will, "Oh, I got to buy that book. I got to see what that's about."
And so you're, as you say, you're looking at putting out this as a series as well, like a limited series.
Yeah, we're gonna see how long it goes. We're gonna do a Kickstarter. That's what I'm gonna do a Kickstarter on, because I figured that had such a great tagline. That would be my best opportunity to do a successful Kickstarter, or at least to do my first one. And that's going to probably be out towards the end of sometime in September, maybe the end of August. We're working on it. We're going to do some variant covers for it, and I've got 2 variant covers back already that are awesome looking. The artists have did such a good job on them, and I've got 2 more that are in the works. So, and that's what I was saying. You know, I've gotten a lot of ideas from just listening to your podcast on some of the things as far as the mechanics of doing the Kickstarter. So that's helped a lot.
And so talk to us a little bit about what the story of Alma is all about.
Alma is kind of Almost an idea I got from and I don't remember what group it was in, but it was another group on Facebook, which probably means I spend too much time on Facebook. But somebody had made a comment about usually, and it kind of even goes to Buffy, but like in fantasy stories, the person, the hero, the person that always gets the power to save the world or to go save the princess or whatever that needs saving is always a young, viral, usually man, but in Buffy's case, it was a girl,
right?
And which makes sense because you want somebody that has that power to. But somebody made a comment wouldn't it be funny if someone's grandmother got the power,
right?
And the thread was all about basically just riffing off of that. It was joking about it. Nobody was really taking it serious. But in my wacky brain, I read it and I started taking it serious. I was like, wow, what if that really happened? What if instead of they got the power and now they have to go and fight the bad guys and they're the hero, and it just that led to Alma. It's just and I created the character off of just basically off of that riff, and with a little Buffy thrown in, and I showcased that really in the first issue. I kind of bring that out that I know some of this is from Buffy, so I don't want people thinking, oh, he's ripping off Buffy and doesn't even realize it. I know I'm ripping a little off.
So my next question for you, with Isla and Alma and a girl and her dog, you seem to kind of gravitate towards strong female leads. Is this deliberate?
I think when I sit down to write something, I kind of look at it. Does it have to be, a straight white male? Right. I mean, so I figured, I want to write a little diverse. I want to, create some characters that aren't, what we've seen a million of. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm writing another story right now that the main character is your typical white heterosexual male. Right. But I kind of look at it, like when I did Ayla, I was like, at first, she was going to be a man, and then I started thinking, I was like, well, maybe I can, why can't she be why can't this character be a woman and still work? So,
right,
I just trying to be a little diverse in my writing, and it makes it a little more interesting for me because it's a lot easier for me to write a white male character because I'm a white male, and right. I have to think a little bit more when I'm writing a character that doesn't quite fit those parameters.
Yeah. And you have a garden gnome in Alma.
It was I tried to think of the weirdest thing I could do for like her, to be her not her watcher, but in the book it's her her companion. And right. I was trying to think of it. Originally it was going to be the Randy, the cherub from the first couple pages.
Right.
He was going to be her, but then I was like, no, I don't know if I want that. And then I've just recently I moved in the last 2 years to where I'm living now, and in the last 2 years I've been doing more yard work because I have a lot bigger yard. And whenever I go out to buy anything, I see all these garden gnomes. I hate them. I don't want one in my yard. But then when I started thinking about it, I was like, that'd be kind of a weird idea. Let's put a garden gnome in as the character. Just really strange.
So what's next for you, John? As you mentioned, you're doing a Kickstarter in September with Alma.
I've got the Kickstarter coming up. I'm working on issue 2 of Alma. I'm working on issue 2 of Robot Sex. Both of those are written. The artists have the scripts for them. Also working on, I came up with another idea for a story that I've written like the first, I think 8 pages of it. And we're going to see where it goes with that. But it's still kind of in the beginning stages. Right. And then Larry and I are trying to decide what the sequel to 2 Tons is going to be. It's not going to be a direct sequel, and it may not even have all those same characters, but there's a lot of public domain characters out there that we can take. And, we're looking at the goofiest characters, we're looking at the ones that, make you laugh and it's kind of silly at the same time. So,
right.
we're going to end up doing something with something. We haven't figured out exactly what characters we're going to use, because I don't think we're going to use Herbie and Fat Man again. We may end up using Fat Man still, but we may give Herbie a rest in this one.
Right. No, that's such a fun. So this is coming out. This is not available yet, though, correct?
No, that's coming out in December, and that's actually coming out through Antarctica Press.
Cool.
Actually, Girl and Her Dog is supposed to be coming out this month, hopefully by the end of July, and it's coming out through a company called It's Alive Comics.
Okay.
And both of those comics actually got picked up because we were posted on Facebook about it. We were posting samples and stuff, and like the editor of It's Alive texted me one night and said, "Hey, asked about It's Alive." And he said, "Can I see a copy of it?" I said, "Sure." So I sent it to him, and about 30 minutes later, he texted me back and said, "Hey, I'd like to publish this if you don't mind."
That's
cool.
Like,
well, let me see, what's the contract and everything. And within that night, we had worked it out, and, I signed the contracts, and, that was, and then kind of the same thing with Antarctica Press. Ben Dunn, who is the publisher of Antarctica, actually texted Larry and said, "Hey, I liked what I've seen of 2 Tons of Fury." He says, "Do y'all have a publisher for it?" And we're like, "No, we're going to just, I was going to self-publish it." But
right.
Both of those companies, It's Alive and Antarctica, are, distributed through Diamond. So I figured that's going to get a lot more eyes on the comics than what, Diebold does not go through Diamond. Basically,
right.
I sell my comics through Diebold if you come across it online, find my website, or mainly through conventions. So I figured this gets that spread out even, a little bit more. And everyone that I sell through that is going to probably be somebody I wouldn't have sold to anyway.
Right.
So, I figured, it can't. And the deals were pretty good. Basically I own the both comics completely still. So I was like, the deal was good enough that, I was like, all right, yeah, I'll publish. I have no problems with, publishing, going through a publisher.
Right. That's cool. Cool. Well, that's great. So listen, John, you're going to have to come back on when you get your Kickstarter up and rolling and stuff.
Definitely. Yeah. I enjoyed this. Yeah. You're only about my 3rd podcast I think I've done so far. So
okay. All right.
It's been a while. Took me a little while to get into podcasting and stuff. So, it's like, I figured I need to start getting out there, especially if I want people, to direct them to the website and things like that. So,
and that's right. And so people can go to dieboldcomics.com. That's where they have all of your things, your entire series of books that you've been working on is on
everything
there.
I've got is up there right now, I think. The only ones I probably don't have up there now is we've republished. We've taken some of the Fat Man and Herbie and some of these old characters, and I've taken, that are in public domain, and I've actually republished some of their old comics.
Okay.
So, I don't have that up there yet, but pretty much everything else is up there. So all the comics are up there. I've got T-shirts and all sorts of other goodies on there too, that, if somebody wants to buy something. So.
Right. Yeah, you do have a store on there, and in their contact. And so you're, as you said, you're on Twitter, you're on Instagram. Cool. All right. Well, thanks a lot, John, for coming on. This has been fun.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed this a lot.
All right, you're welcome. Nice bookshelves too. Are those mostly comics, or what do you have mostly behind you?
The one behind me is a lot of just books about writing and nonfiction, like on voodoo and magic and different things like that. And the ones on comics you can't see; they're like on the other side, but it's like 3 times as much as that.
So is that standard issue? If anybody moves into Louisiana, they have to have a few books on voodoo. Is that like they give that to you when you go to the DMV?
Yeah.